joined today by Andy Walker, Head of Supply Chain Strategy for Merck. Andy, welcome.
Thank you.
Give me a high-level view of Merck's end-to-end supply chain vision.
Well, what we're trying to achieve from an end-state perspective is to build flow through our supply chains. And what I mean by flow is that making sure all the nodes within the supply chain are connected, so they don't work in isolation, but they're actually connected from an end-to-end perspective. So we can take true customer demand and drive that through the supply chain down to our manufacturing sites and our suppliers, okay? So, which will allow us then to respond faster to our customer needs.
Like any company in the medical or pharmaceutical sector, I'm sure you've seen some big changes in that area that have precipitated the need for supply chain transformation. You talk about some of the changes you've undergone in the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have obviously manufacturing a lot of important medication. A lot of the medication is now coming off patent. There's other people entering the market. So we find ourselves in a situation where, before it was, revenue, very high margins, didn't need to be that efficient. The dynamic of the organisation is actually changing. So the challenge for us now is that we have to be able to react faster to the patient need, and we have a lot of competition out there who are making biosimilars and things of that nature. So we have to be much more agile than we are today.
You have to do all this, but you have to do more with less.
Correct.
Tell me a little bit about how implementing new technology has helped you to achieve that goal.
So looking at new technology has been actually very inspirational inside the organisation. So effectively for the last 20 years, there's been no real change in technology. Technology is not really advanced until we discovered Kinaxis, and then realised that actually, in fact, technology is now one step ahead of the game in terms of the ability to be able, as I said before, be able to connect all the dots. So actually, in fact, we're very excited about the possibilities that are there. Those possibilities have got to get embedded into the organisation, and that's one of the key challenges. So one of the key challenges, in actual fact, is regardless, whilst we have, the technology now, we've got to get the adoption. Okay, so we've got to, transition people from being very reactive in terms of their approach to being very proactive in terms of their approach.
So it's a whole new approach to demand planning, in effect, that you had to undergo.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
Yeah. And what were some of the benefits that you derived from applying this technology to the company?
What it does is it allows us to see all the information we need to run the supply chain in a single place. And because we've got that information in a single place, we can be much more efficient. And being much more efficient obviously not only helps us with profitability, but it also enables us to look at where things are broken within the supply chain and then fix them. And that could be reducing inventory, allowing us to reduce write-off, which again very important in terms of obviously contribution to the P&L. So it's great.
Is there more information out there than before?
There is far more information out there than before. And one of the things that I say to the folks in Merck is that you've got to be a good citizen, because all of a sudden you've got access to this information that you didn't have before. And information can actually drive a completely different behaviour. It can actually end up being far more negative than you expect it to be. So people have got to be, clear with information that's being shared with each other, understand what that information is, and actually how to use that information, obviously for the benefit of the business.
Do you have the challenge of unstructured data coming from social networks and things like that you didn't have to deal with before?
We don't have that big a challenge, particularly in the supply chain space at this point in time. We haven't actually connected that part of the business into our supply chain yet. What we're trying to do at the moment is focus on the foundation, but that's one of the future ideas, future intents that we have, is to start connecting some of that data in.
I don't imagine that you took this application, plugged it into a wall, and everything started working great.
No.
Tell me a little bit about some of your user adoption challenges that you faced.
So the biggest challenge we faced, to be fair, was the if you like, the capability, the functionality that this new piece of software brings. And what I mean by that is that there's been 10, 15, 20 years of the organisation working in a standard way, what they thought was a standard way, standard approach. And then you bring something else that's completely different. I mean, it's completely different. It flips, people's heads in terms of what you can do. And as a consequence, people get nervous, So we find there's a lot of nervousness, a lot of apprehension. And we worked through that with the people, because what we did was we got those people actually involved in the design of the capability. So the way we approached getting the user adoption was actually by getting the people who actually do the work involved in the design, so that then they can see the fruits of their labours, and they can also see what the outcome is, and the particular perspective that they obviously then bring themselves into the overall design.
So at a very basic level, you were dealing with a natural human aversion to change. That was
Yes.
number one.
Correct.
And then number two, the feeling that maybe they felt that their position was in some way being threatened by this new application, when in fact the opposite was the case, I'm sure.
Correct,
It was going to help them, and you had to educate them in that way. Did Kinaxis help you in that area as well?
They did, yes, and they continue to do so. So we're on a 2-year program. We've just started. So we have Kinaxis heavily involved with us, along with support from Accenture as well. And we have a lot of internal resources wrapped up in this this program too.
Mm-hmm. So far to date, with the implementation of this solution, how are things different for you?
I think we're at the dawn of a new era inside Merck, from a planning perspective. I think it's a good thing. There's a long way to go in terms of what we want to do. The key for me, who's the driver of the change, is getting this foundational capability in place first. So we've done a lot, still a lot more to do.
How about the challenge of bringing planning and operations together, or planning and execution, having those work together so that you actually have a collaborative environment and kind of the theory becomes reality? Can you talk about how you kind of percolate down into the trenches, so to speak, if I can mix a metaphor for a moment?
For us, it's, and again, we're trying to do this, if you like, baby steps, right? One step at a time here. We need to be able to crawl before we can walk, then before we can run. So what we're actually working on from an execution perspective is to ensure there's a consistent set of information being delivered to that manufacturing facility or that contract manufacturer, to enable them to do what they're really good at, which is scheduling and actually manufacturing the product. And then that's obviously then feeds the pipeline. So what we're actually working on is a complete change in process. So we pass if you like, a net requirement plan to them, and as a consequence of that, we pass what we call min-max parameters to them. So minimum inventory, maximum inventory at the node that they need to supply. And then they can adjust and change their plan to replenish that inventory. Yeah. So no longer do we need to rely on a forecast going to a manufacturing site. We can just give them the forward replenishment that we need, the min-max, and then they can just simply adjust the schedule as they see fit.
And the net result will be less inventory sitting around that's not needed.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah.
better balance between supply and demand.
Better balance between supply and demand, really understanding the, where there are exceptions between supply and demand, understanding the revenue risk, understanding the cost of meeting that revenue, so therefore working out what the profitability is, and, having true understanding of what the, what the margin is, which would be great.
That's a lot of understanding.
It is.
Wow. Well, Andy, thank you so much for joining us to tell us the story of Merck and your application of this technology and how it's working out for you. Thanks very much for being with us.
Well, thank you.
I've been speaking with Andy Walker of Merck. Thank you very much for watching.